Life can be really hard, and life can also be really easy. Life can be really good, and life can also at times be really bad. The thing is that it's really hard to tell. Was it really good? Was it really bad? Who's to know? In this episode, I'm going to share with you the story of the farmer and his horse and give you some perspectives to hopefully change your perspective. This is the Gen Ed Show. Welcome back to the Gen Ed Show. This is the place where we teach you how to trust yourself and succeed in the modern age. My name is Eduardo de las Cuevas. I am your host. I'm a serial entrepreneur and college dropout that's currently operating multiple 6- and 7-figure businesses, and I aim to help you hopefully learn some of the things that you don't even know. So welcome to your new Gen Ed class. In this episode, I want to share with you all the story of the farmer and his horse. When things are good and when things are bad, when it comes to putting labels on things as good or bad, and how we might tighten our grip on things when we do so, some of my personal story with this story as well that I'll share with you, and how you can add this perspective to your life. So, the farmer and his horse. I want to bring you through this. There once was a farmer who had a horse. And with this horse, he decided to then enter it into the county fair. And at the county fair, all of his neighbors had shown up. And so they went on with the fair, and at the end of it, it turns out the farmer ended up winning. And so he had the prize-winning horse. And of course, as I mentioned, all the neighbors were there. And so, of course, they turn and go, wow, how great, how good. The farmer goes, good or bad, hard to tell. So a couple days go by, farmer's home at his farm, and in the middle of the night, thieves come and they steal his prize-winning horse. So of course, the next day, the neighbors notice that the prize-winning horse is missing, as does the farmer, and the neighbors exclaim, "Oh, how horrible, what bad luck." And the farmer goes, good or bad, hard to tell. Some more days go by, and lo and behold, the prize-winning horse has managed to return, but brings with it not just itself, but 7 other wild horses to add to the farmer's stock. 7 more horses. That's pretty nice. And of course, the neighbors, they see this and they notice and go, wow, how great, such great luck. And the farmer goes, good or bad, hard to tell. So the next day, of course, there's a bunch of new horses, so there's work to be done. And so with that, the father brings his son out with him to start and try and break in some of these horses. And while his son is riding one of the horses, it then bucks him off. And unfortunately, the son falls and breaks his leg. Nosy neighbors, of course, notice this and go, oh, how horrible, so bad. And the farmer goes, good or bad, hard to tell. The next day, officers from the government show up to the farmer's home. And they're looking for men to draft for the war. His son just happens to be the right age. But so then when the officers come to the door and the farmer opens the door with his son next to him, the officers see the farmer, the officers then see his son, and then the officers see his broken leg. They obviously can't draft someone with a broken leg. So they pass them by. And of course, the neighbors notice this and say, wow, how great, such wonderful luck. And the farmer goes, good or bad, hard to tell. And so I wanted to share this story with you because the moral will play in like this. For example, for myself, about 6 years ago now, I was studying at a nice private Catholic all-boys school, and it was wonderful. I absolutely loved that school with every fiber of my being. Unfortunately, I was asked to leave about 3 months before graduation, and in my short period of life, that definitely was one of the most heart-wrenching and, in my mind at the time, horrible things that could have possibly ever happened to me. I was expelled from my nice school 3 months before graduation. I was in the top 10% of my class, team captain of both of my sports teams, 4.51 GPA, great scores all across, 1,100 community service hours. And I was asked to leave for weed, for failing a random hair drug test. But that's okay, because I ended up transferring to where my mother was a teacher. And she was a teacher at the second worst school in Miami-Dade County. And for context, I'm sure you can already start to notice, transferring from a nice Catholic private all-boys school to the second worst public school in Miami-Dade County, culture shock, economic shock, social shock, literally just going to the opposite end of the spectrum, basically. And goodness, getting kicked out 3 months before, not only did I feel like a total outcast within my family because of how much I had let them down, I also felt like such a tremendous outcast to all of my friends, because I obviously had a pretty big falling from the sky in a sense. And now, as I'm sure if you're currently in high school, you may not totally realize, but for those of you out of high school have realized that a lot of the friendships that you had were largely based around proximity. And not to say that I'm not still close with all of my friends, but we were definitely a lot closer due to the proximity, the convenience of hanging out with one another. And so for a long time, or at least for a few months, that first summer coming out after I had graduated and those 3 months before after being expelled, I definitely was in a very dark place. I was definitely depressed. I was very sad. I definitely went down some dark circles or dark corners. And I just had a very, very, very negative label on it. This is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. This is horrible. My life is over. Nothing will be better. Life is going to be so much harder for me. Da 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 da. And then I heard this story of the farmer and his horse, and I had to ask myself, was this really a bad thing? Was me getting expelled and having to go to the opposite side of the school spectrum and have basically all of the hard work I had put in, those 3 3/4 at the other school, just basically get removed? Hurt, but was it bad for me? And since that summer, I am fully convinced that no, I think it was hands down one of the best possible things that I could have ever possibly gone through, and I am so happy that it happened to me. I'm not happy that it did happen to me. I am simply happy that it happened at all, and I get to have the experience. Because now I get to take that experience and I get to learn and grow from it, and it has now, because I have chosen it to be, a growth chapter or a learning point or a turning point in my life that led to a lot more wonderful things for me. But had I not had that kind of adversity, how could I have ever appreciated many of the things that I have now? Heck, I don't think I would even appreciate an education anywhere near as intensely as I do. Because I had to ask myself, was me getting expelled really a bad thing? What if it was actually a really great thing? And if it was a great thing, how can I start to look at it? And so the farmer and his horse, that story ended right there with the officers leaving them, because that was the end of the story. But the message here is a similar message that we're getting as I'm sharing my story with you. That good or bad, it's really hard to tell. But when we go ahead and we label things as good or as bad, we tighten our grip on it. And we make it really hard to analyze the situation for how truly good or bad it may actually be. And this is what I see a lot of people do. They can have arguably great things happen to them, but they're labeling it as a bad thing. So if you label it as a bad thing, how else can you look at it besides being a bad thing? That's the grip that you have now tightened, and that's the only lens you're allowing yourself to look at it through. What if it was actually a good thing? What if your boyfriend, your girlfriend leaving you was actually a good thing? What if your parents kicking you out of the house was actually a good thing? What if you getting kicked out, losing this job, or having this obstacle put in front of you, what if it was actually a good thing? What if everything could just be a good thing for you? You know? What if we could interrupt the pattern that you are currently fostering in your life and interrupt that with something more worthwhile, more quality? What if the bad things that happened to you were actually good things? Could we relabel them? And if we did relabel them and we looked at it through that new lens, could we find something different? A lot of times it's hard for us to see the elephant when we're standing 6 inches away from it. It's a fucking elephant. Step back. Give yourself some breathing room and some perspective and step back from the elephant and ask, is this truly good or bad? Or can I just continue to not have any label on it as being good or bad and allow hindsight to dictate? Because that's what I ended up doing. In that moment, frankly, it was really fucking hard for me to think, what if this is a good thing? I didn't think it was a good thing for at least a year afterwards, maybe 6 months. Because 6 months after getting expelled was the whole summer. It was 3 months, then the summer, and then college started. But what typically happens in college, where a lot of people start to notice like who their true friends are, or that concept, like who's really around, I got to experience that 6 months before everyone my age. I had a 6-month jump on maturity, you know? And I had to deal with that stuff by myself because no one else my age or my grade was dealing with that pain. And I had to learn how to cope with it. So I got hit with 2 different struggles, but I was forced to mature faster. And so that really hard time ended up being really good for me. But I couldn't see that until 6 months later, or until like 9 months later, after I was a few months into college at FSU, but obviously before I had dropped out. So I encourage you, question all the things that you are labeling as being a good or a bad thing in your life. Remove the label, look at it from both sides, allow some time to pass, and then look at it again and say, was this truly good or truly bad, before you write it off as being one or the other. Because how many times, I bet, I know I have, labeled something as being so wonderful and great, and you probably should have done some due diligence because you realized, actually, she's crazy, or he's crazy, or like this was a shitty business idea. I should have thought about, potential other downsides, so good or bad, hard to tell. But be very careful about what at all you want to label it, because your opinions, your beliefs are largely going to be determined by the labels that you put onto things. Thank you so much for tuning into the Gen Ed Show. If you loved this episode, if you thought it was valuable, make sure to share it with your loved ones, family, friends, out onto your social media, on your story with Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, wherever you like to consume. Make sure as well to subscribe, hit that notification bell, download the podcast. And with that, I will leave you as I leave you always, to be present, love deeply, and aim higher. This is the Gen Ed Show.